The war had lasted so long that no one actually remembered why it started. Oh, the official record said otherwise. The Valrek Ascendancy and the Zyxari Dominion both had archives stretching back 12,000 years, documenting every battle, every atrocity, every act of supposed betrayal. But if you asked anyone in the war council rooms, the generals on the front lines, or the countless civilians who had grown up in the shadow of endless conflict, no one knew why they were still fighting. All they knew was that it had always been this way, and it was never going to end until humanity arrived. Admiral Castor Hale of the Terran Diplomatic Corps stared at the holographic war map hovering above the conference table. It was an absolute nightmare. The Valrek Ascendancy, a reptilian empire built on rigid hierarchy and calculated efficiency, had spent thousands of years waging war with the Zyxari Dominion, a chitin-armored species that operated under brutal warrior clans and aggressive expansionism. Neither side was winning, neither side was losing. Instead, they had perfected the art of stalemate. War fleets clashed in endless cycles of destruction and rebuilding. Planets changed hands so frequently that entire civilizations had been wiped out and rebuilt on the same soil multiple times, and their economies had evolved to function solely on the perpetual motion machine of war. The war wasn't just a part of their history, it was a part of their identity. And now? Now they had hired humanity to help them win, which was a problem, because humanity had zero intention of letting this war continue. Elias Grant, chief human diplomat, sat at the negotiation table between two of the most powerful warlords in the galaxy. To his left sat high strategist Zyxari of the Valrek Ascendancy, his emerald-scaled tail coiled behind his chair. His golden eyes were calculating, his expression imperious, his presence designed to intimidate. To his right sat First Warlord Gorzon of the Zyxari Dominion, a towering figure encased in living bioarmor, his mandibles twitching with barely restrained aggression. Between them, humanity, a species neither side took seriously, at least not yet. Zyxari exhaled sharply. This war must end in victory. The Ascendancy cannot tolerate perpetual conflict. Gorzon clicked his mandibles. Your victory will never come, reptile. The Dominion will outlast you, Elias sighed. You've both been saying that for the past 12,000 years. Neither warlord responded. Elias rubbed his temples. Okay, just so we're clear, what are you actually fighting over? Zyxari's tail flicked. The honor of the Ascendancy. Gorzon growled. The pride of the Dominion. Elias stared at them. And that's it? Pride? Silence. Hale, sitting beside him, let out a low whistle. Jesus, no wonder this war never ends. You guys aren't even fighting for a thing. Zyxari bristled. We fight for the supremacy of our people, Gorzon snarled. The Dominion does not yield. Elias sighed, turning to Hale. So, how fast do you think we can break them? Hale grinned. Give me a week. The problem with a 12,000-year war was that both sides had stopped fighting to win. Instead, they fought to sustain the war itself. Both empires had evolved to support endless conflict. Their supply chains, their manufacturing sectors, their entire economies, all designed to keep the war going, but never to actually end it. So, instead of trying to defeat them, humanity pulled the rug out from under them. Fleet deployments were subtly altered. Supply routes were adjusted just enough to create choke points. Key infrastructure, never meant to sustain an actual war effort, suddenly collapsed. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. And within a single week, the entire war machine came crashing down, not through battle, not through brute force, through logistics. The Valrek couldn't deploy reinforcements. The Zyxari ran out of fuel. Fleet after fleet found themselves stranded, unable to fight. Within 7 days, 12,000 years of war unraveled like a badly made sweater. And just like that, the war was over. The reaction was immediate. Zyxari hissed in horror as he read the latest fleet reports. This is impossible. Gorzon's claws scraped against the table. The Dominion does not simply stop. This is unnatural. Elias folded his arms. You're welcome. Zyxari's tail lashed in agitation. Do you have any idea what you have done? Our civilization is built on war. Gorzon slammed a fist against the table. Without an enemy, our warriors will have no purpose. Hale sipped his coffee. Sounds like a you problem. Elias shot him a warning glance before turning back to the warlords. Look, you wanted us to help you win, and we did. We just didn't tell you how we were going to do it. Zyxari and Gorzon exchanged horrified glances. Elias exhaled. Look, you can either adapt or you can fall apart. The war is over. Now it's time to figure out what comes next. Gorzon bared his fangs. And if we refuse? Hale set down his thermos and leaned forward, grinning like a wolf. Then we let nature take its course. Zyxari's golden eyes narrowed. He understood the implication. If the Valrek and Zyxari didn't find a new way to survive, then humanity would inherit the stars, and neither side liked that. Not one bit. The war was over, and now everything was falling apart. It turned out that when you end a conflict that's lasted 12,000 years in just a week, the people who built their entire civilization, economy, and purpose around war don't exactly handle it well. Both the Valrek Ascendancy and the Zyxari Dominion were in freefall. The soldiers, they had no war to fight. The factories, they had no fleets to supply. The politicians, they had no enemy to rally against. And so, for the first time in history, the two greatest war machines in the Orion Arm faced a problem they had never prepared for: peace. Elias Grant sat in the Grand Council chamber of Neutral Station 47, rubbing his temples as two of the most powerful political leaders in the galaxy yelled at each other. On his left, High Chancellor Zaltun of the Valrek Ascendancy. On his right, Prime Minister Urkos of the Zyxari Dominion. Neither of them were military leaders, they were civilian rulers, the people who had spent centuries managing the war machine from behind the scenes, making sure that their societies functioned just enough to keep the war going. And now they were terrified. "This is a disaster," Zaltun spat, his emerald green tail lashing in agitation. "Without the war, our economy is collapsing," Urkos chittered angrily. "Our social order is fracturing. Without an enemy, our warriors have no unity. Clan disputes are already breaking into full-scale power struggles." Elias exhaled. "Look, this is what happens when you build an entire civilization around an endless war. You had to see this coming." Zaltun and Urkos glared at him. Hale, seated beside Elias, took a slow sip of coffee. "This is great," Hale murmured. Elias shot him a murderous glare. "This is not great, Castor," Hale shrugged. "Come on, think about it. They spent 12,000 years planning for war, but zero planning for what comes after. This is like cosmic justice," Zaltun hissed. "We need stability, human." Urkos nodded sharply. "We must have order, and to restore it, we require your assistance." Elias frowned. "Our assistance? How?" Zaltun and Urkos exchanged glances. Then Zaltun took a deep breath. "We need another war." Elias stared at them. Then he closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and counted to 10. It didn't help. "You want to start another war?" Elias asked, voice dangerously calm. Zaltun nodded. "It is necessary." Urkos chittered in agreement. A limited conflict, a controlled engagement, a way to restore unity without total destruction. Elias felt a migraine forming. Hale, meanwhile, grinned. "So, what you're saying is, you need a war, but you don't actually want to destroy each other." Zaltun exhaled. "Yes." Urkos nodded. "Precisely." Hale leaned forward. "Then, my friends, have I got a solution for you?" Elias groaned. "Oh no." Hale's plan was simple. If the Valrek and Zyxari needed a war, then they wouldn't fight a real one. Instead, they'd fight in war games, a controlled, competitive series of simulated battles, a way for their fleets, their armies, and their warriors to engage in battle without actual destruction. A war that would be fought not for survival, but for sport. Elias expected the idea to be laughed out of the room. Instead, Zaltun frowned. "This could work." Urkos rubbed his mandibles. "It would provide a purpose, a means of uniting our people under competition rather than destruction." Elias blinked. "Wait, you're actually considering this?" Hale smirked. "Oh, they're more than considering it." Zaltun looked at him. "How soon can this begin?" Hale grinned. "Buckle up, boys, because you're about to get your first taste of human entertainment." 2 weeks later, the first intergalactic war games began. It was a colossal event, a spectacle of simulated combat, tactical challenges, and absurdly competitive warfare. The Valrek and Zyxari threw themselves into it with alarming enthusiasm. The events included fleet maneuvers, simulated space battles between capital ships, gladiatorial combat, non-lethal warrior duels for prestige, tactical simulations, ground-based capture-the-flag campaigns, the chaos rounds, absurd, unpredictable challenges inspired by human reality shows. It was war, but it was entertainment. And somehow, it worked. Elias couldn't believe it. From the viewing platform of Neutral Station 47, he watched as Valrek and Zyxari fleets clashed. But instead of destruction, the battles were scored. Instead of warlords feuding over territory, they feuded over rankings. For 12,000 years, their people had been locked in endless death. And now they were cheering. Now they were celebrating. Now they were having fun. Hale, standing beside him, smirked. Told you this would work. Elias exhaled. This is insane. Hale shrugged. Maybe, but they love it. And somehow, they did. For the first time in recorded history, the two greatest war machines in the Orion Arm were not fighting to destroy each other. They were fighting to win, and for the first time ever, that was enough. The war games were a massive success, but success came with consequences, because not everyone wanted peace. In the shadows, a resistance formed. They called themselves the Warborn. They believed that war was not a game, and they were about to prove it. Mei-chan, not everyone wanted peace. Sure, the Galactic War Games had become the greatest spectacle in the Orion Arm. The Valrek and Zyxari had embraced the shift with frightening enthusiasm, pouring their energy into simulated battles, warrior duels, and even absurd human-inspired events like Zero-Gravity King of the Hill. But there were those who refused to accept this new order. To them, the war was not a game. The war was everything. They called themselves the Warborn, and they were about to bring the real war back. It happened during the championship match of the War Games. The event was massive. Millions were watching. The Valrek and Zyxari fleets were locked in a tactical showdown, their capital ships firing simulated energy rounds at each other while ground teams engaged in mock combat. The crowd was cheering, and then the explosion started. The attack was fast, coordinated, deadly. The Warborn had infiltrated the station, hiding among the crowds, waiting for the perfect moment. The first bomb detonated in the lower decks, taking out a key power relay. The second explosion sent debris crashing into the spectator stands, plunging part of the arena into chaos. And then came the worst part. The Warborn weren't just bombing the station, they were hijacking the simulation systems. Every single soldier, every warship, every participant in the games suddenly found themselves cut off from the safety protocols. The non-lethal weapons, they were now fully operational. The mock battle had just turned real. Elias Grant barely made it to the emergency command room. Hale was already there, pulling up tactical data as alarms screamed across the station. Status, Elias demanded. Hale scowled. It's bad. He pointed at the holomap where the War Games battle had devolved into actual combat. Entire squadrons were turning on each other. Some realized what was happening and tried to stop. Others saw an opportunity. The Warborn had spent years whispering in the ears of discontented warriors, telling them that the games were a disgrace, a mockery of their history. And now they had a real fight, and some of them wanted it. The station was falling apart. What had started as controlled war games was now a full-scale battle. The Warborn had planned this perfectly. They had operatives on both sides. Some Valrek commanders, furious at the new order, had joined them. Some Zyxari warlords, desperate to reclaim their former glory, turned against their own. It wasn't just an insurgency, it was a civil war, and humanity was caught in the middle of it. All right, Hale said, grabbing a rifle from a fallen security officer. We need to shut this down now. Elias frowned. How exactly? Hale grinned. By fighting dirty. The problem with the Warborn was that they thought they knew war, but they only knew one kind of war. They knew fleet battles and grand strategies and endless stalemates. They didn't know how to fight like humans, and that was a big mistake. Hale's strategy was simple. Instead of trying to regain control of the entire station, they would cut off the head. The Warborn had a central command node, a stolen Valrek battleship docked at the station's power hub. It was coordinating their forces, keeping the rebellion organized. Take it out, the Warborn fall apart. Hale led a strike team of human Valrek and Zyxari soldiers straight into the heart of the enemy. The Warborn had expected a prolonged battle. What they got was an ambush, human shock tactics, hit-and-run attacks, tactical misdirection. Within 20 minutes, they were inside the Warborn command ship. Within 30, the Warborn were in full retreat. By the time the battle ended, hundreds of Warborn lay dead. The rest, they fled. But Elias knew one thing for certain. They would be back. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, the war games resumed. The Warborn had failed. The rebellion had been crushed. And the Valrek and Zyxari, instead of falling apart, they had become stronger. They had survived their first real test of peace. And for the first time in history, they were fighting for something that wasn't war. Hale sipped his coffee, watching the war games from the command deck. Elias stood beside him, arms crossed. You think we actually did it? Elias asked. Hale grinned. Oh yeah, we did it. Elias exhaled. No more war? Hale chuckled. Nah, there will always be war. He gestured at the ongoing war games below. But now, it's war on our terms. Elias shook his head. You're impossible, Hale smirked. And you love it. Elias groaned. In the depths of the Orion Arm, a war-born fleet gathered in secret. Their leader, a masked figure, sat at the head of the war table. They played the footage from the war-born defeat on repeat. They studied it, analyzed it, and then the leader spoke. The humans did not end our war. They only delayed it. And next time, we will not underestimate them. The screen flickered to black. The Warborn had been defeated, but they weren't gone. The Valrek Ascendancy and the Zyxari Dominion had crushed their rebellion, purged their ranks, and secured their new era of peace. The galactic war games were thriving. The economies of both empires had adapted, shifting from war production to sports, entertainment, and controlled military training. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Orion Arm was stable. But in the shadows, the last remnants of the Warborn were preparing for one final move. They knew they couldn't win through strength. They had to strike at the root, and the root of their downfall was humanity. Elias Grant had always known this was coming. He had ended a 12,000-year war in a week. There were people who would never forgive that. And now they had come to kill him. It happened during the closing ceremony of the second annual War Games. The crowds were cheering. Hollow screens displayed battle highlights, warrior duels, and the Grand Fleet maneuvers. Hale was sipping his victory coffee. Elias was standing on the central podium, ready to deliver the closing speech. And then the snipers fired. Hale moved first. The second the first plasma shot cracked through the air, he grabbed Elias and pulled him down. The next shot grazed his shoulder. Elias barely processed the pain. Security forces rushed in. Valrek and Zyxari elite guards moved to intercept. But the assassins, they were already gone. The Warborn hadn't come to win. They had come to send a message, and that message was simple. Humanity must die. For the first time in history, the Valrek and Zyxari launched a joint military operation. Their mission? Eliminate the Warborn. For good. Elias, still recovering from the assassination attempt, watched the battle plans unfold. He didn't like it, not because the Warborn didn't deserve it, but because he knew what happened when you tried to destroy an ideology with force. Hale, however, had another plan. Instead of hunting them down one by one, Hale proposed something far more effective. They would let the Warborn destroy themselves. The Warborn were fractured. Their failed rebellion had shattered their leadership. They had no resources, no supporters, and most importantly, they had no war to fight. Hale's strategy was simple. Give them just enough rope to hang themselves. The Warborn took the bait. They tried one last desperate attack, launching an assault on a key Valrek-Zyxari diplomatic summit. They thought it would reignite the war. Instead, it was a trap. Human special forces, Valrek assassins, and Zyxari shock troops were waiting. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. And just like that, the last Warborn fell. The war was over. For real this time. Months later, Elias stood on New Orion Station watching as former enemies traded, negotiated, and built something new. There were still tensions, still challenges, but for the first time in history, the galaxy was learning to live without war, and humanity had done what no one else could. They had changed the course of history, forever. The war was finally, truly over. The Valrek and Zyxari had spent 12,000 years locked in endless conflict, and in just a few short months, humanity had changed everything. The last remnants of the Warborn had been wiped out. The galactic war games had become the foundation of a new peace. For the first time in recorded history, the Orion Arm was stable. But stability, that was something humanity had never been good at. The newly established Galactic Council had convened on New Orion Station, the first neutral hub ever built by both the Valrek and Zyxari. It was here that the final agreements would be signed. Agreements that would cement the future of the Orion Arm. But more importantly, it was here that humanity's fate would be decided. Because while the Valrek and Zyxari had embraced peace, there was one question that had never been answered. What was humanity's place in the new order? Elias Grant stood in the center of the chamber, listening in stunned silence. Zaltoon of the Valrek Ascendancy spoke first. We owe humanity a great debt. Urkos of the Zyxari Dominion nodded. Without your intervention, we would still be trapped in our endless war. Elias narrowed his eyes. This feels like a setup. Zaltoon exhaled. We wish to offer humanity a seat on the Galactic Council. Silence. Elias blinked. I'm sorry, what? Urkos's mandibles twitched in amusement. The Valrek and Zyxari were once the two dominant superpowers of the Orion Arm, but now, we are something new, and we believe humanity deserves a voice in shaping what comes next. Elias was stunned. Let me get this straight, he said slowly. You want to make humanity, who just broke your entire civilization in a week, one of the leaders of your new government? Zaltun nodded. That is incredibly stupid, Elias said. Urkos tilted his head. And yet we are doing it. Elias ran a hand down his face. Do you have any idea what you're inviting into your political system? Zaltun frowned. We do. Elias raised an eyebrow. Then why are you doing it? Urkos clicked his mandibles. Because we need you. The war shaped our past, but humanity has shaped our future. Elias exhaled. This is a terrible idea. Hale, standing beside him, grinned. Oh no, this is a fantastic idea. Elias turned to glare at him. I swear to God, Castor. It took weeks of negotiation, but eventually, the Terran Confederation officially joined the Galactic Council. For the first time in history, humanity was not just an observer. They were a major power. The Orion Arm had been forever changed. And now, humanity was in the perfect position to shape what came next. Hale and Elias stood at the observation deck of New Orion Station, watching the first united fleet of the Galactic Council take shape. Well, Hale said, sipping his coffee, this is going to be fun. Elias sighed. You know this is going to end badly, right? Hale smirked. Of course, but think of the chaos. Elias groaned. Welcome to politics, buddy, Hale said, clapping him on the back. Let's see how long we can keep this peace before we break something else. Elias prayed for patience, and thus the new era of the Orion Arm began, with humanity right in the middle of it, exactly where they didn't belong, and exactly where they thrived. The war is over. The Warborn are gone. The Valrek and Zyxari have moved forward, and now humanity has been given a seat at the table, whether the galaxy is ready for them or not. A new era has begun, and humanity is about to make things very interesting.